Coldpaws' Warm Heart by Madeline Floyd. Far away, in the land of snow and ice, lived a large polar bear who was always cold and all alone. His name was Coldpaws. When he was young, Coldpaws tried to play with the other animals, but he was too big for their games and no one wanted to play with him. That's when he started to feel cold inside. Poor Coldpaws. He was very lonely. He sat alone and shivered. Time passed slowly for Coldpaws. The only thing that kept him company was a silver flute, which he played each day to forget his troubles. In the land of snow and ice, there also lived a little girl named Hannah. The people in her village said that no one lived across the snowy plains except Coldpaws, a bear so huge and so cold that if you touched him, you would turn to ice. But one day, as Hannah was walking through the forest, she heard some beautiful music. She felt as if the gentle notes were stroking her ears. That night, as she closed her eyes, all Hannah could think of was the beautiful music. She knew she would have to follow it. The next day, Hannah took the same path through the snow. Again, she heard the magical music drawing her closer. It led her out of the great forest, across the snowy plains, and right up to a large iceberg. Hannah crept towards the iceberg and peered around the corner. Right there in front of her was a huge polar bear with a soft, gentle smile. He was playing a silver flute. Hannah could not believe her eyes. She crouched down out of sight and listened until the air fell silent around her. Brrr! The polar bear shivered. His whole body shook, and the snow beneath Hannah's boots trembled. Hannah knew how miserable it was to feel very cold, so without thinking, she took off her scarf, stepped forward, and placed it right in front of the big polar bear. Hannah held her breath. Very slowly, the polar bear picked up the red woolly scarf and tied it under his big, furry chin. He nodded his large, heavy head. Hannah smiled. That night, as the stars lit up the sky, Coldpaws thought how lonely his life had become. He pulled the red scarf closer around his neck, but he still felt cold inside. Brrr! He shivered. Back in the village, on the other side of the forest, Hannah lay in her warm bed and thought about the cold polar bear. The next day, Hannah ran back through the forest, across the snowy plains, and up to the iceberg. I have an idea. Let's do some jumping jacks to warm you up, she said. Coldpaws looked confused and rubbed his ears. Something about the little girl made him feel better, so he lifted his heavy legs and did his best to jump up and down. I have another idea, said Hannah, and she ran off toward the village. As Coldpaws waited for Hannah to return, the sunlight faded and the snow fell steadily through the silence. He blew on his polar bear paws. Coldpaws had never had such a special day, but he still felt a little cold inside. Brrr! He shivered. When Hannah came back, she held out a steaming mug of hot chocolate. This is for you, she said. Coldpaws took the mug in his soft paws and smelled the sweet drink. He took a large gulp and licked the chocolate off his nose. He had never tasted anything so delicious, and now he felt only a teeny bit cold inside. "I have to go home now," said Hannah. "I don't know how to warm you up, but I'll be back to play with you every day." Hannah gave Coldpaws a very big hug, and as she did so, a wonderful thing happened. The cold feeling inside Coldpaws disappeared, and instead he felt a warm glow all over. Now that he had a friend, Coldpaws didn't feel cold anymore. The end.